fourth member of our panel is Milind Gajanan from Pune in India. He is at the Indian Institute for Science Education and Research. He is a scientist, a musician, a poet, and has used improvisation in education as well. So all of these things, I think he'll touch on at least a little bit. Milind.
Good evening, friends. And since I came here yesterday after traveling across the world, I'm also tempted to say good morning. It's time to wake up, and I'm saying this in the context of the rapid expanse of science. 50 years ago, things like information were not in the area of science. Today we talk about information technology. Today we talk about information theory. So science is very rapidly expanding and getting new areas, covering new areas, asking questions in new areas. And I feel that much part of human behavior is increasingly becoming a science more and more. In a gathering of scientists and artists, I'm probably an odd man out because I'm neither an accomplished artist nor an accomplished scientist. I'm an explorer, no doubt, and I keep on experimenting on a variety of things. What you see here are just a few of these experiments. I'm not an artist. I did some illustrations which were more of a part of a biology book, more of a natural history book than an art. But whenever there was need, I did something. I wrote poetry in 4 different languages, composed some music, but to me this was more of an experiment. What I'm going to begin with is a small piece of music, and I did not intend to show the title before the music, but now the cat is already out of the bag. But just, yeah, I had a little different plans in my mind. If you like the music, I was going to say that I composed it, which is not true. In fact, no human composed this. This music was composed by a computer. And I don't mean someone composed it using a computer. The computer itself composed this music. And the algorithm followed. OK, before we go to the algorithm, the reason I thought of doing this was the follows. There is essentially a great similarity between DNA and music. Okay. DNA, the basic molecule that governs science, that both are sequences. DNA is a sequence of base, and music is a sequence of notes. Well, there are certain differences, no doubt, that DNA has only 4 bases, music has 12 notes and more than 1 octave and so on. Then there is a duration associated with each note. But Both of them are subject to mutations. They are subject to recombination. They are subject to frame shifts. The meaning of frame shift in music is slightly different than in DNA. And DNA is subject to natural selection, whereas music is subject to cultural selection. This is at the very fundamental level. But there are similarities at an advanced level too, that music is not only a sequence of notes, there is a treatment that a musician gives, which includes expressions, harmonies, tonal variation, vibrato, staccato, and things like that, which is comparable to gene regulation and epigenetics. Okay, so the similarities are rather vast, and therefore, the question that we tried to ask was whether music can evolve by the same principles as DNA evolves. Well, before we go to that, I want to tell you a small story, which is also a story of collective creativity, and this is one of the ways in which we do science, and this is with undergraduate students. I'm an undergraduate teacher throughout my life. Only recently I moved to a research institute, and my main manpower has been undergrads. The way we do it is we meet once in a week in an event which is called katta. Katta is a word in my own language, which means just a place to sit and talk informally, chat. Okay, so we chat about various things. We chat about science. And then a large number of ideas are generated. This is mainly because there is nothing that we want to achieve. Okay, it comes only out of curiosity, only out of exploration. And hundreds of ideas are generated, and then we leave it to natural selection again. Because out of all these ideas, someone takes up something and says that, oh, this is interesting, I want to work on it. So part of them go ahead. Some students give up work halfway, others complete. And then when we start with 100 ideas, some of them go to a good end where we have often published good papers, often patented, and so on. All this is undergraduate work. So even the idea about evolving music initiated in such an undergraduate katta. The next one, please. Well, so essentially, after a lot of process, which I'm not going into, what we did was we built an algorithm that had the following components. I think even the pointer is not working, but you can see that the active area of the program does something which is very similar to what happens in genetics, that there are some tunes, some compositions in the memory. It can pick up anything from that randomly. Well, we also started from random sequence of notes. But it picks up something from the memory in the active area. It mutates. It plays the original. It plays the mutated one. And then it asks for your feedback. Okay. And then what you do is you tell the computer what you feel. Okay. So either you reject. You say that, I don't like this. Or you say that, OK, this is something. Keep it in the memory. Or you say that, OK, continue mutating, continue recombining. And then at the end, OK, or many times you completely discard. Okay. And then at the end, some pieces remain which you think you like. And those are sent for improvisation. I'm using the word improvisation in a slightly different sense. To biologists, I would say that I'm talking about epigenetic improvisation, not genetic improvisation. So whatever pieces come out of this are actually played. Now, this was done about 20 years ago, and the computers that time were very primitive. Today, this can also be done by computers. But the piece that I played a few minutes ago was a piece created through this process. Well, go behind, yeah. What we did on these pieces was what is called a Turing test, and a Turing test is one of the foundations of artificial intelligence. Alan Turing said that when do you say a machine is intelligent? Okay. So if there is a machine to which you are communicating, and the machine is behind the screen, so you do not know who you are communicating. And he said, if you are unable to differentiate whether the entity on the other side is a human or a machine, then I would say that the machine is intelligent. Okay. So we actually did a sort of Turing test in which there were 20 computer-generated tunes, 20 human compositions. We mixed all of them, that is, randomized the sequence, and played them to an audience and asked them 3 questions. Okay. One was identify whether this is human or this is a machine composition. Number 2, rank it or give it a score between 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. And number 3, just see whether this tune reminds you of something. Okay, if that something is a popular tune, then write down which tune it is. It turned out, I'm showing the data, although the legend may not be readable. In figure 1, what you see is the perceived human, the score of perceived human. And on the left are the machine-generated tunes, on the right are human compositions. Okay. So apparently, except for 3 of the computer-generated tunes, all others had comparable score to human compositions. Okay. Then, in figure 2, you had the scores given according to the quality, the perceived quality of the music. Again, there is little difference between computer-generated and human music. The interesting thing is, when we correlated the perceived H score and the mean grade, there was a good correlation, which means that all good compositions people thought must be human. Okay. Well, in reality, they were not. The next one. Now it is working. Okay. Now, this was about music. Simultaneously, I was thinking that poetry must be much more complex for a variety of reasons. Number 1, music is more abstract and music has more direct similarities with DNA. Poetry is somewhat different because poetry has more intricate grammar. There is this question of meaning, and then there has to be a logical coherence between meanings of different lines. So poetry must be a much more difficult phenomenon. And can a Darwinian algorithm give rise to poetry? And good poetry that cannot be differentiated from human compositions? So I chose a particular form of poetry, which is called ghazal. I'm from India, and although many people may not know much about India, there is one thing that everyone knows, that is India and Pakistan keep on fighting. Okay. Although that is true, there is one thing that brings all Indians and Pakistanis together. There are 2 things which bring them together. One is Indian classical music, and the other is poetry in Urdu, or the ghazal kind of poetry. The word ghazal probably comes from, or not probably, it comes from ghazal. Okay, so ghazal is a form of poetry that has the same grace and gait like a ghazal. Okay. So ghazal initially originated through Indianization of Persian poetry, okay, during 19th century mainly, and even today it remains a mainstream of poetry in these 2 countries. Then this is predominantly in Urdu, which is the national language of Pakistan, but there are more devotees of Urdu poetry perhaps in India than in Pakistan. But now it is practiced in many other Indian languages too. So my take on this was, I was writing poetry in my own language for a long time, and I was trying to ask the question myself, what is the process that goes on in the mind when you write poetry? And I found it impossible because the process was too fast. Okay. Then I decided to shift to another language which I know very little. And I chose Urdu, both because I knew it very little, and number 2, Urdu is supposed to be a very good language for poetry. And I thought that if I start trying to write some poetry in a different language, the thinking process will slow down, and I should be able to track it better. Okay. The architecture of a ghazal is that the unit of it is a couplet. 2 lines together make a sher, and that's a unit. And one ghazal can be composed of 5, 7, 9, any number of shares. There is a dual rhyme structure. There are 2 units that need to rhyme. And then there is a modularity of each share, which is that there is a running meaning, no doubt, but each share stands out on its own, has an independent meaning, and can be perceived independently. But there is overall a particular mood or message or genre which needs to be common. Well, after doing this for quite some time, I started thinking that I am following a particular protocol, a particular procedure, a particular algorithm. Okay. Well, there is a difference. Music was much simpler to program. Programming of languages is an extremely complex task. I don't have the ability to do it. So that the mode I chose was trying to analyze my own mind and see how it works. Okay. So today I think that I am following a particular protocol. Okay. The protocol is you first choose a pattern of rhythm and some rhyme. This also is a process of selection. Once you have this, then you have a potential set of rhyming words. Each can make a different share, potentially. But again, you do rejections, because not all of them you like. Then, once you have chosen the rhyming words, each word has associated words. Okay? So you start gathering the associated words with each of the rhymes. And once you have done it, once you have these associated words, the meaning starts emerging out of these associations. But still the process is not complete. These groups of associated words have to fall into the rhythm pattern that you have chosen. Okay? And this works like a game. I don't know, we play a game in which there is a plate that has several ditches. Each one can hold one marble. Okay? And there are several games that we can play with that marble thing. The thing is, if you take this plate, take a bunch of marbles, put it randomly on it, and keep on shaking, then the marbles automatically set into definite patterns because the ditches are there in the patterns, right? So the kind of rhythm pattern you have in mind is like the specific pattern of ditches. And when you play with words, you just shake it, and the words fall into place. Okay? Once that happens, the meaning starts emerging from it. So often it happens that I have to say, I didn't start with this intention. I didn't start with this meaning in mind. The meaning emerged out of the wordplay. Okay? I'm going to give a couple of examples of how new meaning can come out of, and I would read the original for the phonetic beauty of it, if you can appreciate, but there is a roundabout translation. I don't believe that poetry can be translated, but still, there is a roundabout meaning in English. क्या ये खड़ी करेंगे अब दरगाह मेरे नाम की, इनकी ही चली छुरियां अब तक मेरे अरमान पर, अब तो जहान सारा सजदे करेगा इस ओर, इल्ज़ाम खुदाई का लगा खामखा इंसान पर. Are they going to erect a monument in my name? They are the ones who stabbed my aspirations all my life. Now the entire world will direct prayers and salutes towards me. Why is a human being accused of godliness? Okay. And when these lines emerged, I said, wow, this is stunning. I don't say I wrote this because I didn't have this meaning in mind at all. Okay, the meaning is an emergent property which comes out of what I call constrained randomization. Okay, and in fact, constrained randomization is a Darwinian process. I have another example here which makes it more clear how constrained randomization works. Okay, I have a couple of lines here. Zakhm sile ya na sile yaad nahi, hum yakin se lab sila baithe, which means that I don't remember whether my wounds were sutured. Certainly my lips were sutured. Okay. Well, this sounds great, but I had to reject these lines. I had to reject these lines for two reasons. Number one, a famous Pakistani poet, Faiz Ahmad Faiz, in the 1950s, wrote something which is similar to this. Okay. And I'm not interested in writing the same thing again. But number two, this doesn't fit in the rhythm quite well. There is a deficiency of half a beat, okay, which I don't like. So, zakhma sile yan sile yaad nahi. In the rhythm, hum yakin se lab sila baithe. No. Okay, it doesn't fit. There is a deficiency. And this deficiency I have marked with, okay, so there is a deficiency here. Now, because of this deficiency, Since I was playing with the word changed. Okay? And then I happened to write, Hum yakin se talab sila baithe, and talab means desire. Okay, so now the new meaning is, I don't remember whether my wounds were sutured, certainly my desires were sutured. And this is a quantum leap. Suturing the lips means I was unable to talk, but suturing my desire means that I was unable to think. Okay, a much higher level of social operation. Now, how do we make selection? Okay. So often the selection is related to our lifetime experiences or our imagination of others' lifetime experiences. So this comes from, well, this comes from my experience in science. What is the value of analysis in a market of rhetorics? Okay. तस्बीह के बाजार में तशरीह की कीमत है क्या? आईना उनके है कड़े, ये नूह की दुनिया नहीं. Noah means Noah, Noah's flood. कैसे निपट जाता भला आलम का अंधेरा कभी, हम तो दरफ़शां थे मगर दुनिया नहीं थी चश्मही. It means, what is the value of analysis in a market of rhetorics? Even a Noah cannot establish a new world in a universe of orthodoxy. How can one deal with the darkness of their world? I was ready to give light, but they didn't have eyes. So essentially, I described a few things, although the time was very short. Number one, this entire process started with an undergraduate gathering where we randomly discussed a number of ideas. Okay, so this is an example of collective creativity. When so many people put their things together, put their thoughts together, something is likely to emerge. The other was an actual objective experiment. And the third was a highly personal experiment where I'm examining myself. Okay. But there is a common meaning that comes out through all this process, and that is creativity is predominantly a Darwinian process. Now, whereas when we talk about improvisation, it can have Lamarckian elements. I'm not saying that there is no Darwinism in improvisation, but I'm okay. Earlier, I made a distinction of genetic and epigenetic. Okay, this is very similar to that. And unexpected and unintended outcomes can come through a process of constrained randomization, which is essentially Darwinism. And one of the reasons why people think that creativity, particularly artistic creativity, is divine is perhaps because the artist himself doesn't know how it comes. Okay. And perhaps it comes from a Darwinian-like process, and therefore I'm tempted to say that Darwinism is divine. Okay. Darwinism is spiritual. Okay. I don't have to show the time to show data, but this is what I want to lead to, that I think that there is an optimum level of constraints. If there is too much of freedom, then there are so many combinations possible that your mind just cannot handle it. Okay. If it is too much constrained, then you can't do anything. So there is an optimal level of constraints which boosts creativity. And perhaps an artist as well as a scientist's mind works in a very similar way. There are two main components of this. One component is a tendency to randomize and recombine, and perhaps this is the reason why very often, but not always, both scientists and artists are absent-minded. They mix up things. Okay, this is just a part of their process. And the other is an optimum or appropriate selection-rejection capability on your own creations. So essentially, I feel that it is the same set of principles, but different protocols or different details are needed in different fields of different kinds of arts as well as science. Okay. So thank you. And yeah.